As an avid reader, you undoubtedly have read books that contained characters who won your heart because they were bold and brave and they were willing to do the right thing against all the odds. But this video isn't about them. This video is about the characters that we love to hate. We also know them as. Welcome back to Absinthe and Ink. I'm MJ, and in this video I want to talk about literary villains. Now, literary villains are the shadowy figures that lurk between the pages of some of our favorite stories. And their role is to present a challenge to the hero by being instigators of conflict and chaos. Now, literary villains can be as diverse as the stories that they inhabit. They can be clever and cunning, or they can be repulsive and nightmarish. And in some instances, they can even outshine and become more popular than the heroes. I mean, think about stories like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Dracula. Because, I mean, come on. Who's going to dress up as Jonathan Harker or Henry Jekyll for Halloween? But just why are we so interested in these literary badasses? Well, perhaps it's because villains allow us to explore the dark side of human nature without actually having to get involved in it. We get to sit on the sidelines and watch the pandemonium unfold from our favorite chairs. Now, these scandalous scoundrels are essential to the story because they create tension and suspense and drama, and they kind of act like spices, adding flavor to the literary soup that the protagonist has to overcome in order to move the story forward. I mean, if there's no conflict, well, then there really isn't much of a story. Now, the other thing that villains do is they promote the idea of rebellion, of going against the grain and the specified norms of society. And sometimes that can be kind of, well, inspiring. Now, I'm not saying that we should see villains as role models, but they do often represent suppressed social issues and the desire to revolt against authority. Now, John Milton's Satan is a classic example of that. He's defiant and prideful and argues that it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Now, some of these characters could be seen to stand in as symbols for fears that a society might have. For example, Dracula might be representative of the Victorians' fear of otherness, sexual repression, disease, and religion versus the supernatural. But villains also help to balance the heroes. They make them prove their worth. They make the hero earn the reader's admiration and respect. I mean, if the hero didn't have anyone to fight against, they wouldn't be very heroic. So in that aspect, I think you could say that the villain gives the hero a purpose to exist. Now, I think it's fair to say that humans love drama, as long as it isn't our drama. And the villains, they provide the turmoil and the adversity that holds our interest and keeps us engaged with the story. Characters like Mrs. Danvers from Rebecca and Kathy Ames from John Steinbeck's East of Eden are the most memorable characters from that book because they created and fed the drama that readers crave, including yours truly. An interesting little side note about Kathy Ames from East of Eden. Apparently, that character was based on John Steinbeck's ex-wife, whose name was Gwendolyn Conger or Conger. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. But what I am pretty sure of is that must have been one hell of a marriage. Now, the other thing about villains is that they aren't always born villainous. A lot of times they are products of their environment. If you think about characters like Heathcliff and Frankenstein's monster, they're good examples because Heathcliff wasn't born hateful and with a black heart. And Frankenstein's creation didn't become malevolent and murderous until after he was rejected by his creator. Now, while we may be appalled and repulsed by their behavior, we can still kind of understand why they behave the way they do and maybe even have just a little bit of sympathy for them. Now, of course, you do have villains who are wicked and diabolical just for the sake of being, well, wicked and diabolical. Now, Shakespeare was a master of creating characters that audiences love to hate. And two of his best known characters are Iago and my favorite, Richard III. Now, both of these characters are cowards who crave power and ambition and are willing to do whatever it takes to get it. And both of them also seem to be able to use language really effectively as a weapon. For example, Iago knows exactly how to articulate something to Othello in order to gain his trust and his confidence. Iago knows how to say something, when to say it, and how to say it. And in the case of Richard III, well, Richard III actually tries to woo Lady Anne over the corpse of her father in law, who Richard III has just murdered. And the other thing about Richard III is that he uses his deformity as an excuse or a reason as to why he is so evil. Now, in the beginning of the play, Richard III states, "Since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain." And then you have the villains who are kind of admirable, like Professor Moriarty, the nemesis of Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes referred to him as the Napoleon of crime. Now, Sherlock Holmes was probably the greatest literary intellect of the late 19th century. And he saw Moriarty as his intellectual equal. Even though Holmes didn't like what Moriarty was doing. He despised the crimes that he was committing, but he also kind of admired him. Now, Moriarty was a very shadowy figure who was basically known by reputation alone, because a lot of the people who were working for Moriarty didn't know they were working for Moriarty. And even Holmes doesn't really have a personal interaction with him until the final problem. And, well, y'all know what happened then. Now, a good villain will ultimately make the protagonist appear all the more heroic because they're able to play on the protagonist's weaknesses and their fears and their anxieties. And in some cases, the heroes have to overcome those things before they can take on the villain. Now, villains show us that we no doubt live in an unperfect world. But there's something really important that they also show us, and that is that faced with adversity and conflict, humans can always prove to be heroic. So I'd like to know who some of your favorite literary villains are and villainesses. Go ahead and leave that in the comments for me. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Absinthe and Ink. Bye bye. And speaking of literary villains, here we have the Hound of the Baskervilles. Now, literary villains. Why is this so fucking hard? And religion versus. And he considered himself. Fuck. Move forward. Fuck you.